You can use a calculator to estimate things on, estimate points on a graph. A local maxima or a local minima would be a peak or a valley on a graph. So we have a polynomial function here, and I can go in and I can hit the y equals button in the upper left-hand corner, get my equation typed in here, and then hit the graph button. If I do that, I can see that there are a couple of valleys here. So there's a local minima here and another local minima there. And we have one local maxima, we have one peak here. So I'm going to have to find a couple minimum values and one maximum value. To do that, one of the things that you could do is you could hit the trace button. But before you get in and start doing that, you may want to get closer to those maximum and minimum values. So to start with, I'm going to go into Window. I'm going to change the window so that I can see this part of my graph a little bit better. Here's 0, 0. So if I kind of go over and look where a value would be for my left side of my graph, that would be a little bit zoomed in, maybe over here at about -4, and over at +4 would be good for the left and the right sides. My maxima and minimum values are in between those. And then on my graph, the bottom doesn't look too bad, but I have a lot of extra space up here at the top, so maybe change the top so it's up at about 3. So if I go into Window, my X-min and my X-max, that's the left and the right sides, I'm going to change those to -4 and 4. X-scale just tells you what the marks are going to be on the X-axis, and I do want that to count by ones, so that's fine. I'm going to leave my Y-min at -10, but I'm going to change my Y-max so that that's up maybe at about 3. And then when I hit the graph button, I still should be able to see those maximum and minimum values, but I'm zoomed in a little bit and I can get a little bit more accurate picture for that. To estimate a maximum or a minimum, you can hit the trace button and then use the arrows to slide left and right to get an estimate. So for instance, that right there looks pretty close to that maximum value. If I slide left or if I slide right, looks like that's probably the maximum. So I already know when I hit trace that a decent maximum estimate would be the 0.01. If I scroll over to the left, you can hit it a bunch of times or just hold it down. As you hit the left and the right buttons, these X and Y coordinates down at the bottom, those are going to change. And if I go down to the bottom, scroll left and right a little bit, looks like about here is where the minimum value would be. So that would be at about a -1.53 and -8.01 roughly. So let me write these down. I have a minimum, looks like the point -1.53 comma -8.01. That is reasonable. And I could do the same thing with the maximum and the minimum values. That's using the trace feature on the calculator. That is reasonable, but there is a better way. We can come up with a much more accurate maximum or minimum value if we calculate a maximum or a minimum. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to calculate this minimum value. It'll probably be pretty close to here, but it will be more accurate. So this is the preferred method of estimating these maximum and minimum values. So here is my minimum. I want to calculate it. So I'm going to go second trace, and then I have some choices, and minimum is one of them. So I'm going to hit that. The calculator is going to ask me for 3 things. The first one is a left bound. What it means is this. Right now my minimum value is about here, and the calculator wants me to scroll over to the left and hit the enter button. So I'm going to scroll over to the left, so I'm to the left of the minimum, and I'm going to hit enter. The calculator put a little triangle up here at the top of the screen, and it changed its question. Now it's asking for the right bound. So now I want to be over to the right of the minimum. As long as you're over to the right, it really doesn't matter how far. Right now, the cursor is blinking here. That's a little to the right of our minimum value, so I'm going to hit enter again. And it's asking for one more thing. Oh, it did put that little triangle up here again. So what it's going to do is it's going to look for a minimum value between those 2 triangles, which is where my minimum is located. Now it wants me to guess. So you just get down somewhere close. It doesn't even have to be very close at all. And the calculator will come up with a minimum value. If you round this off to 2 decimal places, we end up with a negative 1.52 and negative 8.01. So you can see, using the trace feature or coming up with the calculator to do the actual calculating, they are pretty close. This is closer than they usually are. Sometimes they're a bit more off. If I had not zoomed into my graph before I did the trace, these numbers would be vastly different. This number, the calculated number, would be exactly the same for this problem, but the trace numbers would be off by quite a bit more. So it does depend how you zoom in and out. So the easiest thing to do is actually to find a more accurate value and not worry about adjusting your screen. Let's find the other minimum value over here. So I'm going to go into trace again, go down to minimum. It wants me to be over to the left. It's asking for the left bound again, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to be a little to the left of my minimum. Asks me for the right bound, so I'm going to scroll over to the right. I'm over to the right now. I'm going to hit that again, and then guess. Hit the enter button one more time. So we have another value, another minimum at approximately 1.15 and a negative 2.3, negative 3.24. So those are our minimum values. And then we have a maximum value here that I want to estimate. So I'm going to go into Calc one more time. This time select maximum. It's going to ask me the same 3 questions. Left bound. Hit the enter button once you get over to the left of the maximum. Right bound. Hit the enter button once you get to the right. It'll put those little arrows there. And then, again, you don't even have to be super close for your last guess, and then hit the enter button. The calculator gives us a weird number on this one. It says negative 4.997e negative 8, which is really, that either is scientific notation for times 10. So it's negative 4.997 times 10 to the negative 8th power. That's very, very, very close to 0. It's 0.00, I won't even reach it out. It's about 7 zeros or so, 8 zeros, and then our number, and then our y-coordinate of 1. The directions on this problem were to find the local maxima and minima. We have a maximum value at the point 0, 1. We have a couple of minimum values. So our final answer would look about like that. You can use the trace feature, but often you do have to go in and adjust your window to do that. Either way would be fine, but the preferred method is to actually have the calculator calculate a more accurate minimum and maximum value. And to be quite honest, there really isn't a big difference in the amount of time it takes to do those two things. So as you do these, I would recommend having the calculator calculate the maximum and minimum for you instead of using trace, but both of those methods would be acceptable.